Once again, this is Gabe Morales with Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians. I am very excited today to introduce a guest that I've known for many, many years now. We have attended a lot of gang meetings. In particular, I remember we brought him in to instruct on Mara Salvatrucha and 18th Street when I was with the International Latino Gang Investigators Association. I also recall him being at an FBI task force meeting, Washington, D.C. on Mara Salvatrucha. He has a lot of expertise in a lot of different gangs, not just those two. He has 30 years experience, in fact. He's a veteran of the Los Angeles Police Department, and he retired recently in 2020 as a detective sergeant. He has received numerous commendations for his work in gangs and other venues, other assignments. And he also is the author of a book called Boot, about going through as a recruit, new recruit with LAPD, and has some good advice in there. He also has another book in the works, and I think he'll tell us a little bit about that new book coming out. Please help me welcome Mr. William Dunn. Bill, how are you, brother?
I'm doing good. How are you, Gabe?
Oh, I'm doing all right, man. Just, retired, thinking about coming out of retirement. I'm not sure yet. I'm old, but see if I got, a few more miles in me, maybe do something like you, part-time work, or when I want to or can. That would be the ideal situation. But
yeah, so the fun part is that you get
like
to work
Bill. I want to be like you, brother. Yeah. So please tell us, where were you born and where did you grow up?
Well, I was born out in the San Fernando Valley, which is part of Los Angeles. And I grew up on the west side of LA in Westwood.
Very good.
Yeah.
And did you imagine San Fernando Valley, you encountered some gang members? What about out in Westwood? Were there any gang members ever coming to the area?
Yeah, what's interesting about that, when I was a young guy, busing was going on. So I went to Emerson Junior High in 72, 73, and we had a lot of kids who were bussed up from Watts. So I actually went to junior high school with a lot of kids who were from the Crips, and we also had Brims. There were no Bloods at that time. We just had Crips and Brims. We also had some local kids from Sotel, which is a gang that was over about Sawtell and Santa Monica Boulevard. And I played Little League Baseball with those guys. So I knew a lot of kids from Sotel. I had actually a really good friend in the Crips growing up. But remember in 72, 73, that 7th, 8th grade, the whole gang thing wasn't really solidified. We had problems with the Crips fighting with the Brims at Emerson, but they weren't like bothering other kids. But they were going at it. I do remember that.
Gotcha. Well, as you know, I've been doing some recent documentation on the history of the Crips and Bloods, and yes, for those people maybe not familiar with that gang, it started in 1969. Raymond Washington is considered the founder of the Crips. Of course, other individuals like Tukey Williams and other people joined him in the early 70s, but they definitely blew up, as I'm finding in my investigation work. They are definitely spread throughout the city. And as you said, Brims and other gangs, bounty hunters and stuff, existed actually prior to the Crips, but we're not known as Bloods yet, or even the Pirus out of Compton, but they banded together because they were so outnumbered by the Crips. So that is very interesting. I also am aware of, Sotel is not a very big gang, but it's a very old gang, and that some Mexican mafia guys that claimed Sotel when I was in the California Department of Corrections. So very interesting environment there where you grew up, Bill. And so what made you decide to get into law enforcement?
Well, it wasn't, I went to college. I went to UCLA and graduated, and I got into business. And when my coursework at UCLA was along the lines of accounting and economics. And I briefly worked for the Securities and Exchange Commission as a broker-dealer examiner. And while I was there, I got involved in one of the political corruption investigations. And although I didn't like the paperwork, accounting, you really got to have that gene, and I just didn't. it got me interested in doing police work. So I ended up quitting that job and I worked at another business for a while. But then I applied to the LAPD because I just thought, I was thinking about going back to law school. When I joined LAPD, I actually didn't think I'd stay 30 years, but every time I tried to leave, they pulled me back in, so I couldn't get away from LAPD, but I ended up joining in 1990.
Very good, very good. Well, you had a long, illustrious career, so I'm sure there were some tough times, but also you remember some good times. So
Mhm.
tell us, what were some of your better assignments that stand out in your mind? Were you with
Oh,
LA?
well, I mean, I worked gangs for a long time. I worked all the different acronyms of gangs with LAPD because it's changed over the years. There was Crash, there was Get, there was Get, anti-gang stuff for different task forces. So I've worked quite a bit in street gangs. That was probably my best assignments were working gangs.
Very good, very good. Are there any gang related or non-gang related cases that stand out in your mind? If so, maybe you could tell us a little bit about those details.
Well, one that actually has come to mind, and that's kind of interesting because I know people talk about MS-13 and 18th Street. They're really bucking heads right now, and they've been for years. But it turns out I was actually at the Homicide where those two gangs actually used to get along. But in about 1991, they ended up having a split over a house party. They ended up having a murder at a house party, and it split the gang. And part of and I mean, it is kind of funny, but part of the problem that the two gangs began to have is 18th Street for a long time had a big rivalry with Harpies, and I think that they still do. The guy who started 18th Street, one of the Glover brothers, actually is still, I think, in prison for a murder of a Harpy. So they had this war going on kind of in the lower part of downtown LA, where they had a big shooting war. Well, MS, for whatever reason, I mean, MS being MS, because they do a lot of crazy stuff, they decided that they would go in and agitate this war between the Harpies and 18th Street. So they started going up to this place. They called it the Harpy Hilton, which is where all the Harpies hung out. And they started doing shootings at the Harpy Hilton, but calling out 18th Street when they were doing it. And they ended up getting caught, doing that, kind of inciting this thing. And they just thought it was funny. They thought, this was a funny thing that they were doing with 18th Street. But when 18th Street found out, that kind of pissed them off because they were getting hit, not knowing that a retaliation was coming for something 18th Street did. And then that ended up that break ended up hitting them at a house party in 1991. And that's when the actual split happens. Before that, they actually did get along.
I am very familiar with all those gangs, man.
Yeah.
Of course, I didn't work the streets like you did. I worked on the inside, but it's just interesting how you bump into the same people, the same names pop up over and over. Those that they want to stick in that lifestyle and are interested, like you and me, in becoming very good at what they do. And of course, we're on the other side of the fence, trying to deal with those individuals. So,
right.
So thank you for sharing that. That's definitely some history, and people can look up more on that feud. As Bill said, they're still feuding 18th Street and Mata Salvatrucha, even down to Central America. It's just amazing how it is spread. And so, Bill, why did you decide to write your book, your first book, Boot?
Well, that book is really about what it's like to work your first year in kind of a really high crime area. But I consider myself a fairly normal person when I joined LAPD, just an average Joe. And the change that you go through during that first year of when you go from being citizen to cop is really, there is a big change. So what I was trying to do is document that change through that book, Boot, and it's actually Boot, an LAPD officer's rookie year. And it came out quite some time ago, but it does document everything that happened in that first year and some of the changes that I felt and that I saw in myself.
Very good. So it sounds like it was written to document some of the stuff you went through, as well as help other officers that might be going through those similar situations, correct?
Yeah, it's really written to the new officer or the person who's considering becoming a police officer. The book has been used in a couple different college classes, where they're teaching law enforcement. Because I think that I lay it out pretty well, and I'm trying to be pretty honest. I don't sit there and make myself this stellar police officer. I show some of the pitfalls that I encountered and some of the bad things. I mean, you're going to screw up when you're a rookie. You just can't help it. So I also point out some of my screw ups and some of the things that I could have done better.
Right. Well, I read your book. It's very good. I suggest other people get a copy of that, especially if you're thinking about getting into law enforcement, and making a career of it. It is not for everybody, but there's a lot of people who have a knack, people like yourself, and became very good at it, constant professionals. So I appreciate you, helping our fellow officers or potential officers out still with that book. And can you tell us a little bit about, I understand you have a new book in the works. Can you tell us a little hint, a little tease about what that might be about?
Sure. Yeah. I worked on a task force with the knock knock burglars. And what we were trying to do was come up with strategies to take down some of these larger crews that were doing burglaries at high-end homes in Tarzana and Sherman Oaks and Encino, which are wealthy areas out here in Los Angeles. And what I'm trying to do with that book is not only point out some of the more interesting cases, but also show some of the pitfalls that we ran into. Like sometimes when you're working with your federal partners, and I love our federal partners, but they will sometimes string things out longer than they should. A state and a municipal agency, we have to work with the day in, day out crime. They're really looking for the racketeering, the long haul thing. Well, there are times you really got to put your foot down and say, no, we got to arrest this guy now. We can't let him go on for a year, doing crimes while you try and pull more people into the net. So I try and show that in any of these types of big investigations, there has to be a balance between the feds and the municipal agencies and how you can negotiate those things. But it's that, and it's also some really great cases, some really interesting stories.
It sounds interesting. I've heard from a lot of cops, and you may or may not agree with this, but they'll constantly tell me, the feds, they got all the toys, they got all the money, they got all the time, but we may not have all that stuff. So, yeah, they're good to have as partners, but there's also some with everything, pros and cons in that situation.
Yeah, there has to be a balance, and sometimes you just got to explain it to them. They're looking for certain things to fulfill their needs from the federal side, but we also have ours from the municipal side. So sometimes you just talk about these things and you negotiate them, and a lot of times they're pretty reasonable. And they'll say, okay, we'll go get this guy now. We won't wait a year. That kind of thing.
Very good. Well, I know also the feds, I think it was a good move on their part too. They started hiring a lot of local officers on their task force. So that's not, feds versus the locals. And I think that has bridged some gaps. I've talked to quite a few people that are, were street cops, local street cops that were assigned those gang task force and other criminal task force, drug task force, whatever it may be. And that seems to be an improvement. I know we still got a ways to go, but that's that's something that's a constant, no matter what agency. Even I'm sure you agree, LAPD and LA County Sheriff sometimes, will be some competition in it, and friendly competition is okay, but we should not be working against each other because the criminals will take advantage of that.
Well, that's one thing I'll show in that book too, is the Sheriff's Department has a really great surveillance unit, and so does the Ventura County Sheriffs, that are just fantastic. I won't get in too much into what they do and all, but I just give all kinds of high fives to both sheriff agencies. They do a lot for the city of LA to help us fight burglaries and organized retail theft groups. Yeah, they're great.
Right. Yeah, well, as agencies a lot of times are assigned to certain jurisdictions. Criminals don't have that, that limitation. Right. They're going LA County Sheriff's guys, criminals and crooks are going into LA area and vice versa in other cities. So thank you for pointing that out. We need to all be on the same team and work towards the same goals.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit? I understand you're working on a new project. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, even though I'm retired, I am helping out with Robbery Homicide Division has a homicide library, which is a new thing. I don't know of any other, really anywhere in the world. And what they're doing is they're trying to get all the murder books, and murder books are basically have all the documents from, say, a murder case. They're trying to get them all together in one area, and then download all the information into a computer and see if they can come up with a way to kind of see if we're missing some like serial killers or people who are multiple homicide suspects, and seeing if a computer can actually pick them out. They're trying to come up with an algorithm to see if they can take all this information. And we're going back to 1990 actually, and trying to bring all that information together and see if we can hook people up who have done, multiple murders, as well as if we missed any DNA, if we can get all that submitted, because the DNA is getting so good, and what's amazing is that there's some really looking ahead, forward-sighted detectives back in the 80s and the 90s who actually kept a tremendous amount of DNA evidence that at that time, I think that they were just booking it, knowing that somewhere in the future, they might be able to do something with some of the stuff that they collected. So there's tons of that out there that still has not been run on a lot of the murder cases, and just trying to find it and then get it into the system is quite a chore. So I'm helping out with that right now.
Very good, man. That sounds great. I know there's probably a lot of victims where those crimes were not solved. They're still going through trauma and it's still affecting them, even if it happened years ago. So that sounds great to get some justice for those people and their families.
Yeah.
Very good. And so, Bill, if you were a young teen today, and I think you agree, things have changed a little bit since we were growing up back in the day.
Yeah,
If you're
quite a bit.
today, yeah, yeah. Some things for the better, and some things I don't think not necessarily for the better. But if you were teen today and gangs were approaching you and trying to pressure you to join them, what kind of advice would you have for that young teen to stay out of the gang lifestyle?
Well, my whole thing is if you're in a neighborhood where the gangs are pressuring your kids, you got to get your kids out of there. So the first thing I would tell those teens to do is go sit down and talk with their parents and explain to them the situation that they're in. And if it is something where they have to move, that may not be a bad thing, because the gangs are right now, they're becoming so corporate. They're becoming so money driven that they are forcing a lot of the kids into the gangs. I mean, that part has really changed quite a bit over the years. It used to be just in certain neighborhoods that were doing that, but I think that it seems like they're all doing it now. They're all trying to turn the gang into a pyramid scheme. The more youngsters that I have working for me on the bottom, the more money I have flowing up to me. So really, if I was a teen, I would go straight to my parents, let my parents know what's going on, and see if you guys can come up with a solution to help you out. Because the parents really have got to get involved in this. You can't just leave it up to the kids. I mean, teenagers are teenagers, and a lot of times they do dumb stuff, and they're really susceptible to peer pressure, and their brains are still just forming, right. So they can get pulled down paths real quick. But my main advice for a kid would be to go speak with your parents or your grandparents or whoever is around, and let them know what's happening and see if they can help you with the situation.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, they may have to. Right now, a lot of people don't want to work, and there's a lot of jobs out there. I've been looking at the market actually, and so
Yeah.
you may have to, as a young teen, say, "Hey, mom, dad, I will work part time and help you maybe get a little bit more money for rent or whatever, so we can move out of here to a little bit
Yeah.
less gang infested neighborhood." That is,
Yeah, I had a job in high school. I boxed groceries at the local grocery store. There's nothing wrong with having a job in high school. I was able to buy my own car,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I think that's having that early work ethic is really important too. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good. I think a win-win situation
Yeah.
versus getting a criminal record, maybe because you're uh, being pressured to shoplift or whatever it may be, and then or steal a car or whatever it is, and then
Yeah.
now you have a harder time getting a job. So
Let me also jump in with one other thing. I am very dubious of a lot of the anti-gang programs right now, especially some of the ones that are run by some of the former gang members. The kids got to be very careful with what they're joining. The same the parents. You really got to research these groups, because we do. I mean, I dealt with No Guns and some of these other groups that turned into real problems when I was working gangs. And that's all really I can say on that. I'm not saying that they're all bad. There are probably some really good ones out there, but just from personal experience while I was working, we did have problems with some of the gang intervention groups not being what they seem to be. And parents have to be very careful who they let their kids hang out with.
Well, I agree. Even
Yeah.
back in the 1970s, I was not working as a street cop or corrections, but I talked to a lot of the old veteran guys, and Mexican mafia was infiltrating drug rehab programs even back then. So
Yeah.
definitely, it's nothing. It's not really something new. It's been going on for a long time. And as you said, you just got to be careful. There are some good ones out
Right.
there, but some individuals may have ulterior motives for
Yep.
doing what they do. And thank you for sharing that, Bill. And so, you wrote this book, Boot, but it's been quite a while since you and I were at the academy, and things have changed. Again, not necessarily for the better for cops now working out there. A lot more politics, I think, affecting them. A lot more, eyes and ears, just waiting for them to make mistakes. So, if you were a new recruit now, and I understand LAPD is down quite a few officers, so if you were, why should they join LAPD? And if you were a new recruit, what kind of advice would you have for that new officer, he or she, going out there in today's world of policing?
Right. The job is still a good job. It has a steady paycheck. You have a retirement, you have a pension, which are things that you just don't see with a lot of jobs nowadays. You do have the ability to make a difference and help people. So I think it's still a good job, but you really got to go and look at each agency that you want to apply to and just make sure that that you have that fit where you feel like the agency is taking care of the people that are working for it. Some are better than others right now, and that can always change because that's just a function of who is at the top of the organization. If you see the top of the organization in the news, backing their officers and such, then that's probably a pretty good agency to look into. But it is a very tough environment right now. You can read my book, and I do make some comments in there that no matter what the other officers are doing around you, you are always responsible for your own actions. Nobody, you can never in court say, well, so-and-so told me to do such and such. That's never going to hold up because you're a police officer. You're always responsible for your actions. So I think that the number one thing for a recruit who's just going out in the street, just remember, the law, you've been trained and you've been taught. If you do something bad, it's on you. Somebody can't tell you to do something. If somebody gives you an unlawful order or tells you to do something that you question, don't do it. Just refuse to do it. If it's an unlawful order or something like that, which obviously it's happening at times because people are going to jail for certain things, you're responsible for yourself. But understand too, is we're seeing so many bad incidents about police right now, simply because it's a function of the way media is now. The bad stuff that officers used to do is way down. I think when I first came on the job, we were shooting people into triple digits, I think, in Los Angeles. And I think we're down to about 30 or 20, something like that this year. So we're not, the violent acts with the police officers are not as many as there used to be, actually, but they're recorded and they're put in the news much more than they used to be. The 1960s news was not putting stuff out the way that this 2021 news does. So just be cognizant of that. The police officers today, I think, are pretty mild. They may have good common sense and they really do some really good police work. The one problem is that everything is recorded. And when one bad person does something, we all end up paying for it. And there has to be a way to kind of fix that in the citizens' mindset, that they're seeing everything bad and they don't realize how much better it is than it's ever been. So there has to be.
I would agree. Having worked out at the police and corrections academies and seeing the training, I know of nobody, no TAC officers, no training officers that would tell somebody to do something, illegal. I just don't see that. As you said, there's individual officers, rogue officers, maybe some bad apples that are doing things in spite of their training. But the narrative is actually there's less use of force. I think there's more professionalism. It's just, you wouldn't tell that from the media. But I used to always tell as a TAC officer, my recruits that, do the right thing. And I did not make up the saying. I can't remember where I heard it, but do the right thing even when nobody's watching. And
that's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one.
Follow your SOP and just do the right thing. And I didn't have a lot of problems. I did have sometimes dirty looks from some guys that didn't like the way I did things, but I kept my job. I was able to sleep at night. I held my head up high because I would do the right thing and try to help people and try to do my job well. So thank you for saying that, Bill. Now, this last one, kind of is relevant to that previous question. If you were a politician today, knowing what you know today about what's working, what is not working in the criminal justice system, what kind of policies, laws, and regulations would you implement to make this situation better?
Well, number one, I would pay police officers quite a bit more than what they're being paid now, because the effort that they're putting out there is more than I think any police officer has ever put out there in the past. That would be the number one thing. And then that might ease all of the taunting and hard, speech that these officers are getting. That would help quite a bit. I would also try and make the justice system more fair. One of the things I think that is very frustrating is that, some person doing a crime here with the same, say, rap sheet as a person who did the same crime over there, they're getting different sentencing right now. And that can be a problem. There's a little bit too much leeway. I'm more into thinking that having a more even-keeled justice system would be better. They also have to come up with some kind of policies to deal with the theft problem right now. From history, I was always heard and taught that you can tell a civilized agency, a civilized society, by how we protect people's property rights. Not really about the violence, because violence is always going to happen, and sometimes that's only happening in certain parts because violent people seem to sometimes attract each other. I don't know, but it's the property rights, and we have to figure out a way to regain that property right stuff, because when youngsters can go in and just empty out these shelves of these stores, that's how are you going to fix that? These youngsters right now think that they can just go in and steal anything they want, and then there's no consequences. They got to fix that, and they have to fix that fast, because today, right now, it's just knocking stuff off the shelves. Tomorrow, they're going to start taking over abandoned houses or homes that people leave vacant, because right now they don't want to rent them out. And once you get into those types of issues, it can snowball from there, where people just feel like they have the right to just go up and just take something from the person on the street. So the property right thing is a real problem right now. The violence is actually seems like it's down quite a bit from, I'm comparing this to, I was a cop in the street in 1991 when it was really bad. Violence still, even though it's ticking up a little bit, it's not as bad as it's been. But that property right thing, they have got to get that in.
Gotcha. No, I totally understand. In Hawaii, where I've lived for the last 5 years, car theft is rampant. And it just so happens that methamphetamine is also rampant. They seem to go hand in hand. And a lot of times you will hear the judges, you know, very low bail or no bail. And because it's a nonviolent crime. And tell that to somebody who has to drive, you know, an hour or 2 hours because they're trying to improve themselves, get a better life, and you know, go for the bigger wages in the city, that kind of thing. And now they can't get to their work, and now they lose their job, and now maybe losing their house. And I also recall when I would classify offenders in jail, the very first charge on average for a young male was car theft. For a young female, it was shoplifting. So you can't tell me that, you know, those things don't matter, because like you said, then it often leads to them bigger crimes, and often more violent crimes. So I think, yeah, I agree with you there. We're sending the wrong message by saying, hey, it's not non-violent, you know, don't do much to them. Let them steal 20 cars before we give them a month in jail, that kind of thing. It's just nuts.
Oh, it's shocking. It's absolutely shocking to me, you know, the crimes that they're and the problem with the reporting too is people have given up reporting. I actually heard one of my chiefs say not too long ago, I think he even said it was on the news, that he believes that as much as 40% of the crimes aren't being reported right now. And that's a real issue if people aren't reporting, you know, and given that most of the crimes that they're not reporting are the property crimes, but still we're not, the statistics, if we're working off of statistics, our statistics then are all screwed up because people aren't reporting crimes. And that's a
Yeah.
real problem.
Yeah, yeah. If they lose faith in the police, I hear that all the time in Hawaii too. You know, hey, I called in, you know, this guy stole my car. He stole my other car. Now I have no car, my my alternative vehicle. And the judge just, you know, slapped him on the wrist. They're like, I'm not even going to call the cops next time. They lose faith in the system, and that only helps the criminals. It does not help the cops. It does not help the public. That just, you know, leads to worse things. And
Yeah, I think a good fix for that might just be for some of the lower level crimes like the shoplifts and say, you know, your car getting broken into, just having the ability for people to just go online and make that report real quick, and then it can be reviewed by a police officer when they have time. Because sometimes calling into the police right now, there aren't enough cops to answer all those phones, so people get discouraged because the phone lines keep, you know, ringing. Well, if they're able to report a lot more of the crimes than they are right now, I understand that some agencies allow, you know, some low level crimes to be reported. But I mean, bringing in all those, even maybe all those misdemeanor crimes and make them reportable on the internet, and then they'll be reviewed by a police officer later. I think would help out quite a bit.
I think
Yeah.
that's a great idea. And even maybe
Yeah.
put a crime map, like, you know, agencies do sometimes with analysts. And so at least then the neighbors know, hey, you know, burglaries are up in our neighborhood. A lot of
Yep.
times we do that verbally, but they will be able to see it. You're right. That's why not?
Yeah.
Since we have less staff, let the public help us fight crime more.
Well, what's funny is they're talking about now nextdoor.com and the Ring camera system and all that. People are reporting on those as opposed to reporting to the police, and that's really bad. You know, when when people are just talking amongst themselves about crime in their area, and they're basically just even walling the police off from their own little community. You know, they have this great, you know, chats about, yeah, hey, my car got broken into, and yeah, somebody, you know, stole mail out of this mailbox and stuff, and the police don't know about it. You know, how are they going to know where to patrol and all that? The neighbors know, and the neighbors know that there's this big problem, but that doesn't do us any good because you don't have the police now going out there and trying to catch these guys and all that. So we got to also get the people off of the internet reporting amongst themselves and reporting to the police.
Good point. Good point. So just so people listening, don't just report it on Facebook to your friends.
Yeah.
Report it to your local police department. Yes, as Bill said, maybe they don't send a car out right away, but at least then it's documented and they can follow up on it. And if enough people are complaining, you know, hopefully then they can get more officers hired, more patrol in that area. So thank you for saying that, Bill. And yeah, we want to make the situations better, not worse. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close here today?
No, you know, if you're a young officer or you're thinking about the, you know, the police work as a career, go grab my book, grab Boot. It's out there. You can get it on Amazon. You can, you know, and hopefully it might help you, you know. You'll see how I screwed up and the issues I had, and it might make you feel better.
All right. All right, brother. Hey, it was good seeing you and stuff. You know, you take care, and really appreciate you coming on our show here. Aloha. And
Oh yeah, there you go.
yeah.
Yeah, have a great Hawaii day.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother. If I'm
Aloha.
ever down in LA, I'll look you up, man. We got to go out again. All right.
Okay, do that. Do that.
All right. Take care,
All right,
brother.
man.
Okay.
Bye.